dehydrated. Just you breathing and drinking are the same thing right now. It is good to be back. I had a great time at Sunset. I hope some of you will consider going next year to the Vision Workshop. It's really, really, really a wonderful time. In fact, they put me in a hotel room. I had 2 giant beds, so somebody's got a free place to stay next year if you come. If you can handle the preacher and his snoring. How's that? But it was a good time. But you know, I was there with them, and Texans, I love being around brethren that are Texans, but they're different than Michiganders, you know. They wear their hats. I saw about 50 cowboy hats in the assembly, and they wear their boots, and I know that underneath their suit coats, they've all got a gun. I mean, you know they do. They're all about, Brother Dave would have done well in Texas. They're all about law and order down there, you know. In fact, they told me about kind of a sad court case where this couple, this lady and her husband, they were struggling financially in this recession that we recently had. And so the lady was caught at the local store there in Lubbock, and she was stealing a can of peaches. And they caught her, and the store prosecuted. No mercy. It's Texas, no mercy. So they prosecuted, and sure enough, she got in front of a law and order judge. And she started making excuses. Well, my family was hungry, and I didn't know where to turn. I didn't know what to do, and I couldn't get assistance. And he said, this is Texas. We don't care. I mean, you broke the law, and there's no mercy here. How many peaches were in that can of peaches? She said, I don't know, maybe 14 peaches, 14 peaches. He says, well, you're getting 14 years, lady. To which her husband spoke up and said, but sir, she stole a can of peas before that. Think about it. All right, we're in Joshua chapter 1. And we're going to have a few weeks. We have a kind of a shortened Sunday night assembly on the week of our annual meeting. And next week, Brother Tom will be here with you, and the week after he will be. So it'll be a while before we get back to Joshua. But I wanted to start in with an introduction, and no better way to do that than for us to just work our way through chapter 1. And I call this lesson, chapter 1, the theme, Lean on Me. Everybody knows that song, right? Lean on me when you're not strong, and I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on. And I think that if you envision God communicating those words, lean on me. When you don't feel strong, when you don't feel courageous, when you don't feel like you can do it, lean on me. And the unfortunate thing is that so many times, especially people in the world, but even people who know better, even people who are believers, when times get tough, our first instinct is not often to lean on Him. It's generally to lean on ourselves, right? And so I think that's really kind of the theme that we're going to see throughout this first chapter, that will be a wonderful introduction, really, to the entire saga that's going to be revealed as we work our way this year through this book on Sunday nights. Let's read together. Joshua 1, verse 1. Now it came about after the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord, that the Lord spoke to Joshua the son of Nun, Moses' servant, saying, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now therefore arise, cross the Jordan, you and all the people, to this land, which I am giving to them, to the sons of Israel. Every place on which the sole of your foot treads, I have given to you, just as I have spoke to Moses. From the wilderness of this Lebanon, even as far as the great river Euphrates, and all the land of the Hittites, as far as the great sea toward the setting of the sun, will be your territory. No man will be able to stand before you. And all the days of your life, just as I have been with Moses, I will be with you. I will not fail you or forsake you. Be strong, be courageous, for you shall give the people possession of the land which I swore to their fathers to give them. Only be strong and very courageous. Be careful to do according to the law which Moses my servant commanded you. And do not turn it to the right or to the left, so that you may have success wherever you go. This book of the law shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do according to all that is written in it. For then you will make your way prosperous, and you will have success. Have I not commanded you, be strong and courageous? Do not tremble or be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Now, contextually, we look, and historically, we know that they've been wandering for 40 years in the wilderness. Their life has consisted of a daily reminder of their shortcomings and their failures. And in essence, an entire generation has passed on. I mean, Joshua and Caleb are the two oldest men in the whole group. I mean, Joshua, and we think of Joshua as being a young man, don't we? Be strong. Joshua's taking over for Moses. You know how old Joshua is right about now? 80 years old. About 80 years old. He is not a young man. He is not diving in to a great adventure with all the vigor of youth. He's at the point where most folks would be retiring or thinking about it or passing it on to younger, stronger. But here's the thing. To me, that is just even that much more powerful of a testimony to so many different ideas that are important to us now. And that is that sometimes I feel, well, look at my age. And I know some of you are saying, yeah, you're not very old. Well, compared to Seth, I am. And some of you may be looking at, yeah, but I'm compared to Kerry, I am. And others of you may look and say, well, my usefulness is gone. God forbid we ever say that. When we realize that the greatest conqueror in the Bible didn't start being a conqueror till he was 80. 80 years old. And God says he's been preparing him to be a leader. You look at your life and I don't know what all's taken place, what difficulties, what problems, what lessons you've learned. But maybe God's brought you through all that to bring you to now so that you can be a leader. He went through years of desert wandering with a people that all they knew was complaint, relying upon God and facing enemy after enemy and just dreaming of someday, we're going to see a promised land. And now God comes and says, you're going to be the one to lead them. And yes, he has to tell them to be strong and courageous because, even old men, when there's a big task at hand, feel inadequate. I mean, when the gravity, the importance of the job. Don't you imagine that if God had put a job description for this out there among the Israelites? I don't know how many Israelites there were at this time, maybe 1 million, 2 million of them. And he puts out a job description. How many applicants you think he'd have? You know why? Because who would step up and say, I'm qualified? I mean, who would do that? Who steps up to say, I'm the guy who can lead the Israelites to conquer the promised land? Nobody. In fact, if God were to interview and poll people for this job, they're all going to say, yeah, if he says, give us some recommendations, who would be good? They might recommend Joshua or Caleb, but they're not going to say, I'm qualified. Because nobody on earth is going to feel qualified to be the next Moses, right? That's exactly how he has to feel at this moment as God comes to him and says, you're the man. You're my man. It is time. It is time, finally, for that which your generation has waited all their lives. I'm going to make a reality through you. And Joshua is trembling in his boots. He's not trembling, I don't think, because he thinks God won't be true to him. I think Joshua's trembling in his boots because Joshua doesn't, it's not that he doesn't believe in God. He doesn't believe in Joshua. Right? Which makes sense. And it's not nothing in regard to his character. I mean, him and Caleb are the only two guys that have good enough character to make it into the promised land of that original generation. I mean, he knows, I think he knows he's a good man. But the reality is who on earth would feel qualified and worthy to do this? So God says to him, I mean, how many times do we read it just in those 9 verses? 3? Be strong and courageous. Be strong and courageous. You can do this. You can do this. You can do this because I am with you. In other words, maybe the theme of Joshua could be, we can do this together. Several things here that Joshua and every person who steps up to come into what God wants for their life needs to remember. And first of all, in verse 3, every place on which your sole of your foot treads, I have given to you, just as I spoke to Moses. He's asking him, first of all, to believe in God's promises. To believe. And to believe doesn't mean that you never struggle with doubts. To believe is more than just to have an emotion or sense of something. To believe is to choose. To choose, to decide this is the way something is, and to live out and to act, even regardless of what your emotions in the moment tell you, to live out that belief in action. You see, he had to believe that God would keep those promises. And as he looks back, I love the way it expresses it, back at the last pages, in one of the last chapters of this great book, chapter 23 and verse 14. Joshua is talking to the people after they've conquered the promised land. And he says, now behold, today I am going the way of all the earth, and you know in all your hearts and in all your souls. Listen to the emphasis of his language. You know in your heart and in your soul. You know down deep. What do you know? That not one word of all the good words which your God spoke concerning you has failed, but they have all been fulfilled in you. You see, part of believing is remembering. We are so bad at this part. Because I look back over my life, and I can honestly say in hindsight, not one word of what the Lord has promised me has failed. Not one word. He has always kept his promises. He has always seen me through. And with hindsight, it's so clear. Looking back over the years of our life, it's so clear. And I remember certain moments. I remember moments when my heart was breaking and I was struggling and I was crying out to him. I remember exactly where I was and exactly what I felt. And exactly when I poured out. I remember one time my heart was breaking and I cried out and I just sang the song with, there's nothing like singing a song with all your heart and emotions pouring through your voice. Be with me, Lord. I cannot live without thee. I dare not try to take one step alone. And the next song that came just from my inner man was, abide with me. And he did. So why is it that now if I face challenges in life, I wring my hands or pull out my hair when every time as I look back over my life, I realize that not one promise he gave has ever failed. Right? Joshua needed to believe, to act upon that belief. God promises him strength, success, and support. He tells him down in verse 9, wherever you go, I'll go with you. You know, I have found that when you have to go and do something hard, it's always easier if somebody says, hey, I'll go with you. Right? Well, yeah, he's got a hard task taking over Canaan and all the lands of the Canaanites and all the armies of the Canaanites. But God says, but it's all right. I'm going with you. I'll be with you. He has to believe. Secondly, verse 5, no man will be able to stand before you. I love this phrase. All the days of your life. No man will be able to stand before you all the days of your life. Just as I have been with Moses, I will be with you. I will not fail you. I will not forsake you. I will not. You see, when Joshua leaned upon God, he was unbeatable. It's only when he didn't that they saw any failure. Psalm chapter 3, verses 5 through 6. Psalm 3, 5 through 6. Proverbs 3, 5 through 6. It says, thus, trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understandings. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your path straight. See, Joshua only had problems when he leaned upon himself instead of leaning upon the Lord. When he trusted in his own wisdom rather than leaning upon the Lord's. That's why the Lord tells him in this text, did you study my word, know my word, follow my word, obey my word, and all will be all right if you just lean on me. Now, Joshua's going to learn that the hard way. Later on in the book, there's an interesting story of now that the Israelites are kind of whooping everybody, they have that problem at Ai that we're going to look at because there's sin in the camp and they lose that first battle. But once that's all corrected, they win. And these other nations are getting upset. So there's some trickery that takes place. Some people come and they dress like they're from far off. And Joshua, rather than consulting with God, he just makes a decision. And he makes peace with some people he shouldn't have made peace with. And they're going to suffer. The Israelites won't get everything that's rightfully theirs because he leans on his own wisdom there instead of trusting and leaning upon God. Lean on him and not on yourself. We look down and it tells him in verse 6, be strong and courageous. For you shall give the people possession of the land which I swore to their fathers. Be strong and courageous. Verse 7. Be careful according to the law of Moses to do as I command you. He's telling him, get rid of your doubt. I know that regardless of how you feel, push that aside and press on in faith anyway. And finally, verse 10. We read through verse 9. Now look at verse 10. Then Joshua commanded the officers and the people, and he's going to tell them what to do. They're going to step out on that Jordan River. They're literally, we use the phrase, you need to step out in faith. They literally have to step out, and the Jordan River will miraculously be stopped. But they have to take that first step. You see, that is always the real test of faith, the real test of trust. It's not what we say. It's not how spiritual we sound. It's whether or not we're willing to really do as Peter did that stormy night and take that first step and shift our weight out of the boat and onto the sea. That's the test of faith. That's what Joshua had to finally do. And when he gathers the people together and he says, I command you, go. Is when he's taken this belief, this trust, listened to the promises of God and decided, where you lead, I will follow. And he takes that step. Lean on me, God says. And it was a message to Joshua, but it's a message today. Regardless of, I don't know what kind of Jordan rivers you face in your life. We all have them. Challenges, difficulties, things that seem like they're insurmountable, impossible to cross. But as you face those things, listen to God's promises. Believe them. Not just because of what you know he said, but because you look back and you know from the experience of your life. And then decide to lean on him, not on yourself, and step out. And just do what's right, regardless of the fear, regardless of the challenge. Do what's right. Trust him. And he will not ever fail or forsake you. If we learn nothing else from Joshua, we need to learn that. Tonight, if you need to, in your life, if you're facing a Jordan River and you've not yet decided to step out, it could be a whole host of things that you're facing. Let us pray for you, help you, encourage you. Come right now as we stand and as we sing.